joined by finance writer Sophie Elsworth from Newscorp. You can read her in all the papers, Daily, Telly, Herald Sun, all the good papers, and leading lawyer Justin Quill from McPherson Kelly. Let's talk about the Prime Minister's blunt message to corporate leaders. The Australian report, Scott Morrison has ramped up pressure on corporate Australia to focus on workers rather than activist causes. The PM said, if you want to advance the cause of your employees so they can earn more, there isn't time for distractions. The most successful businesses are those that focus on that. That's fairly unusual for a Prime Minister to be so blunt. Obviously, they're not happy with corporate Australia, the coalition. They feel like, a lot of policy areas where corporate Australia and their shareholders and their employees would have benefited, they've been silent, and yet they've been vocal on a lot of divisive social issues. So how do you think the business world will take this little lecture from the Prime Minister?
I don't know if they'll take it that well, Rita. I mean, but saying that, these big businesses often come out and, as we know, they've pulled advertising for certain broadcasters saying certain things, saying we are not going to advertise on this channel or station or whatever it may be. So they don't really like being told what to do. So I'm not so sure they're going to take this messaging from ScoMo that well.
Well, the business world knows, Justin, that the government's pretty unhappy with the corporates because they've just been sitting on the sidelines, being quiet about critical issues where it actually directly affects the running of their business. And yet, when it's, say, same-sex marriage or it's climate strike, I mean, there was a bunch of companies today who came out, one of them a travel company, and supported these kids wagging school to protest about climate change. I mean, if you're a travel company and you think the kids are right, you should be shutting down your business. I mean, this is the sort of hypocrisy that I think people don't like, and obviously the government doesn't like it either. Yeah,
I mean, I thought it was interesting that Ben Morton, although he's a fairly junior minister insofar as his time in Parliament, so I think he's only second term. He's really, I think, in a little way that ScoMo's sort of a tack dog, if you like. and for him to say we are not the political arm of big business in the same way as the Labor Party is for the union movement, I thought that was a really interesting thing to say. Hey, you better start towing the line a little bit. I might say in terms of businesses coming out though and making those sort of social justice type statements. I'm pretty sceptical that they're doing them for any other reason other than that they're trying to read the tea leaves and think this is going to be a popular position for us to take. I think they're not. I think they are doing it for their bottom line and not because they think it's the right thing to do. Now, I think there's a bit of both in that because they've got marketing departments and human resources departments that are completely sort of overtaken by this lefty crusade. Social justice, perhaps. And they probably mix in circles where they think that everybody thinks like this when, the election showed they don't. Well, so that's I guess my point though, that I think they think that they're doing this for their bottom line and that everyone thinks like this, and if we take this position then it's really going to help our bottom line. I think that ultimately is their main motivation. Whether they're reading that correctly, as you say, probably the election would suggest that they've got to reevaluate their read on these sorts of things. So. Absolutely. I mean, there is this divide now, isn't there, Sophie? Because you do have Labor and the unions and they stand together, and traditionally it was Liberals and the big end of town. But that has not been what we've seen for the last decade or more even.
Yeah, that's right. But just on the point of these big companies and banks and insurers and whoever it may be, I don't want them to tell me how I should think. I go to them for a banking product or my insurance product or whatever it may be, and I don't want to be dictated to about how I should think politically. I think they should stay out of it. And a lot of the people I deal with in the comms teams, marketing teams, some of them are very divided. Some say, look, we're going to adopt an approach. We're going to say we're pro-gay marriage or we're not. Others say we're staying well out of that. Yeah. And I think it's smarter if they just stick to doing their job and stop getting involved in these social issues. I think people are getting a bit fatigued with being told how they should think. Oh, absolutely. And it is so divisive amongst, even say something like same-sex marriage where it's got majority support. He got, 60-odd% of the vote. But there's still,
around 40% who said no. So you're alienating a large segment of the community. You could be alienating a large segment of your shareholders, your staff, your customers. And that just seems stupid to me, Justin. So that's when I know a lot of them do it for the bottom line because they think this is a smart thing to do strategically, but I just don't see that. It seems so risky.
If you just take that 40-60% breakup that you just gave there, you can alienate the 40% by coming out and saying that. You won't alienate the 60% by not saying anything. I think that I would have
just
thought...
stick to your knitting is what we're saying.
That's what I would think if I was the CEO, but that's why I'm not... Perhaps that's why I'm not the CEO and I'm sitting here and said...